Now we begin with a shocking move by the Mexican drug cartel suspected of the kidnapping of 4 Americans and the murders of 2 of them. The Gulf cartel turned in 5 of its men, beaten up with their hands tied behind their back inside a black pickup truck. Alongside them, a handwritten apology letter, which says they, quote, decided to turn over those who were directly involved and responsible in the events, and that they, quote, acted under their own decision-making and lack of discipline. Just a few hours later, reports surfaced from Mexico that it had arrested the leader of the Gulf cartel. The move may appear like a crackdown on the narco-terror groups killing 100,000 Americans a year with fentanyl, but don't be fooled. The president of Mexico made this stunning comment yesterday. Here, we do not produce fentanyl, and we do not have consumption of fentanyl. Why don't they, the United States, take care of their problem of social decay? Kaylee, the utter preposterous nature of that comment is mind-blowing, but the thing that I keep thinking about is there's no way he would have made that audacious comment under the prior administration because he knew exactly what he was dealing with then.
You took the words out of my mouth. There was a relationship of mutual respect between President Trump and AMLO, as they call him, President Lopez Obrador. Despite being on vastly different sides of the political aisle, Obrador being very far left, President Trump obviously being very conservative, but the key element was respect in the relationship. We've talked before about President Trump threatening tariffs and getting action from Mexico to stymie the tide of illegal immigrants. And you compare that to what happened when President Biden came in during the first call between AMLO and President Biden. He said, I must mention, we have a very good relationship with the new president of your country, or the now president, Mr. Donald Trump. He went on in the months thereafter, the Mexican president, to call Biden the migrant president, which was an insult to President Biden and his open border policies. Don't think it would have happened under President Trump, but I do think what the Mexican president's trying to do is kind of do some fancy footwork here with his wording, because technically what he is saying is the fentanyl compound comes from China, but it is produced in the labs in Mexico. So this compound, this key ingredient, is China. In fact, the Wall Street Journal reporting on a lab there in Mexico talked about jugs lining the rim of the lab, and one of the drugs was fentanyl XXX. One was called Chinese chemical. So I think he's just trying to engage in some nuance here by saying we don't produce fentanyl because we rely on China for this key compound.
I know you're hot on this, Jason. Take the floor.
Well, you got to listen to what the Attorney General said. If we can go to this sound and listen to what the Attorney General said and what they're going to do.
Huge epidemic of fentanyl problem created by intentional acts by the cartels. We are doing everything we can within our resources to fight that. We have our DEA working to prevent transfer of precursors into Mexico, to capture the labs, to extradite the cartel leaders, to arrest them in the United States. We are focusing on fentanyl with enormous urgency.
That is an absolute, complete fabrication of it. He said that every resource of the DEA, every resource of the FBI is honed in on taking down these drug cartels. There is nothing further from the truth. That is absolutely not true. You think about it. We have more than 50% of the people that are trafficked north, according to the Border Patrol agents that you talk to, are raped along the way. Fentanyl is killing more than 100,000 people per year. Yeah, and we have untold number of drugs coming north. We have more than 150 countries represented of people that are being trafficked north. We're pulling people off the terrorist watch list. And that the Attorney General has the gall to go before the United States Senate and the American people saying, we're using every resource. They are absolutely not doing it. And if they are, they're totally failing, because these drug cartels, they're acting like a nation state. They're saying, hey, don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. We took care of it. We administered justice. Let's get back to business, because they are raking in billions and billions of dollars out of the U.S. economy into the Mexican economy. They're the ones running the border, not the president of Mexico. And for the Attorney General to say he's got it under control and we're throwing all these resources, they are absolutely failing, and they're misdirecting on this.
And Marie, here are the 3 things that I think viewers need to hold on to, which they already do. Number one, fentanyl deaths were at their lowest under the President Trump administration. Number two, the surge across the southern border, the amount of illegal migrants flooding across the border and fentanyl has never been higher than under the current administration. And against the landscape, number three, of a president who has been in office in Washington, D.C. for over 50 years, through the 80s, through the 90s, through Pablo Escobar, through the decades of work between federal agencies, our intelligence communities, and the South and Central American governments, and the intertwining that they have with these narco cartels. So who better, you would think, to understand, to acknowledge, and to act than the President Commander-in-Chief? But we are getting anything but, to Jason's point.
Well, I think that Joe Biden and his whole team is quite concerned about fentanyl. And you saw yesterday there was a high-level White House and administration group of officials that were in Mexico talking about fentanyl, talking about the murder of these American citizens. So I think they believe this is an incredibly important issue to tackle, not just at the border, but in states across the country, too. This is not just a sort of Mexico issue. This is also a domestic issue, as we've talked about before. Look, Mexico has a problem. The Mexican president, I think, knows he has a security and a political problem at home. You saw them mobilize resources after these Americans were kidnapped faster than law enforcement in Mexico generally does anything. This obviously never should have happened, but the Mexicans, I think, understand they have to have some accountability here because American citizens died. So you saw them mobilizing pretty quickly. I think he's trying to deflect on the fentanyl issue. A lot of it comes from China, as Kayleigh said. A lot of it is also made in the United States. A lot of it comes through Mexico. This is a problem that requires a whole of government approach. I do think DEA and the FBI are focused on it, Jason. I think they know this is a problem and they are doing everything they can to get this under control. But this has been a problem for multiple administrations.
If you care, build a wall, like continue the border construction, stymie the tide of illegal immigration. It's not like fentanyl walks across the border by itself. It comes with illegal immigrants who are crossing the border.
Ports of entry, though. It often comes through ports of entry, hidden in trucks, in other ways. It doesn't always get carried by people crossing illegally between those ports of entry. So ports of entry have to be hardened and secured. They're trying to do that right now.
I'm sorry, I just have to cut in here. The rank and file, you're right. The rank and file is doing everything they can. They're the ones that have their lives on the line. I talk to them all the time. With no help and despite the utter lack of support by this administration, including and especially the public commentary supporting law enforcement. It is a joke to look at this in terms of 1 year or 2 years back. Again, this has festered, Amy, under this administration's swamp hold in this administration, in this government, I mean, for so many years. And the notion that, oh, we're doing everything we can now. No thanks to the utter lack of funding, the utter lack of public support, the utter lack of anything concrete, including a mutual, respectful relationship with those leaders in Central and South America, because they think of this administration as a joke, because it's the machine that was left over from before.
Well, yeah, they've responded with a handwritten note from evil people in the cartel, thinking that dismisses it. And then they've also responded with the gaslighting from the president of Mexico. So that's the response. But if we truly are going to look in the eyes of a mother or any family member from the thousands of fentanyl deaths that have happened and say we're doing the best we can, it's America. We can do a lot better than we're doing right now. And so the actions and the things that we put into place are meaningful. They will translate into results, but they have to be powerful. I mean, you bring the good point back about border control. We've got to go back to that place and say we mean business. Right now, things are happening because they can.
This Monday, I'm interviewing Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, who are the two DEA agents that took down Pablo Escobar. And I just hope and pray that their incredible story, which many people have seen from Narcos, that it's not in vain in the way that it is under this administration. Hey, everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.